how's everybody doing? Excited? Cool, yeah, me too. I'm actually super excited to be back here because it's been 5 years. 5 years ago I was here for the first time, and that's where it all started for me. So I watched Formula One for years, just looking from the couch and going to the racetracks and stuff, but 5 years ago I was able to also, like you're going to do today, go behind the scenes, see what it's all about. And that completely sparked a new interest. I'm an organization designer. I help organizations transform the way they work. And I had never really considered the world of F1 as an example until I went behind the scenes. So it's super excited to be back here after 5 years. And I'm going to give you a taste of what it's all about. So yeah, I'm here, like I said, we're here with my colleagues Nadia and Richard over there. We work at The Ready, and I'm the author of Formula X. So that book started 5 years ago when I entered the factory tour. So yeah, for many years, this is what my relationship with F1 looked like. And this photo deserves some special attention because this was me crying for half an hour after I saw Max pass Lewis in that corner in December. So I was really out of my mind. Yeah, so I still go to the races, and I'm just a huge fan of Max. He's also a Dutchie. But it's all about how to run your business like a Formula One team. I'm gonna talk about that. So let's talk about organizations. Does anybody know what this is? Org chart, right? So what year is this one from? How old is it? Or how recent? Can you speak up a little bit because it's hard for me to hear? 10 years? 50 years? Who said more than 50 years? Who says less than 10 years? Yeah. Well, this one is from 1910. It's actually one of the oldest org charts we could find. And we were already doomed from the start because this one has dotted lines already. Like they already acknowledged that even though we can draw an organizational chart, it's not really going to work this way. And then I show this slide all over the world, and we get very similar answers, ranging from 100 years ago until yesterday or even tomorrow. And why is that? Like, why is it that it's so hard to carbon date the org chart? Like if I would have shown you this car from 1910, this racing car from 1910, you would immediately recognize it doesn't look anything like the cars we have around here. But for some reason, the social technology we use in our organizations hasn't really evolved. And there could be two reasons, right? There's many reasons, but one of the reasons could be that maybe it's perfect. Maybe we don't need to innovate it. Maybe it's just fine the way it is. But you obviously all know that's not true, right? So we are stuck in meetings, we are stuck in Zoom calls, we're overloaded by emails, we're suffering from slow decision making. We have to, bark up the chain to get approval for something, and then hopefully you get to do what you do. We're all kind of constrained in doing the best work of our lives. And I think that needs to change, and that can change. So for years I've been studying organizations that are rapidly innovating, doing stuff differently, until I went to Formula One. I got a new perspective on that. All right, so let's talk about F1. I'm going to assume there's a lot of F1 fans in this room. So who here actually watches every race that's going on? Occasionally, some races. No races, also fine. One in the back, all right, so 2 in the back. I'm gonna get you all up to speed on the same page real quick, like what is F1? So F1, so where is this? Anybody have an idea where this is? What race is this? Singapore, yeah. Marina Bay, for sure, it's a night race, very nice. So what is F1? We're talking about a sport where 10 teams, 20 drivers compete over 23 races on 5 continents in 8 months. And they travel all over the world, 23 countries. It's a world traveling circus. On average, there's 100 million viewers every race. So it's a big, huge global phenomenon. And we're in the center of it, right? This is the world champion contestants for this year. So yeah, it's a huge sport, but it's also the biggest team sport in the world. So this is the photo they took when Max came back to the factory after he won the championship. And the numbers vary a lot, but the smallest F1 teams are 500 people. The largest number I ever heard was 2,000 people, and I think Red Bull is somewhere in the middle, and it's shifting with the budget caps. But these are big teams. These are organizations that are suffering from some of the same challenges or design challenges as our own organizations, right? If you want to have 1,000 or 2,000 people run in the same direction or kind of all focused on that same goal, you need to figure out how to organize that. You cannot just drop those people in a factory and hoping it will go well. We also, they also won't run through the normal bureaucracy hierarchy that we have in many other places. So that's why this is such an interesting example for me. So an F1 team is basically a team of teams. There's a large number of different sub-teams that can create these teams, right? So there's some on this slide, like the gearbox team, suspension team, hydraulics. All of those separate teams need to come together. They're creating an element or a part of the car, and that has to integrate and to create the fastest cars in the world, basically. And so that's the design challenge. How do you get a team of teams to collaborate well and to deliver the fastest car on the grid? The other challenge here is the pace of innovation. Does anybody have an idea of how many parts are in a Formula 1 car? 1,000? Who would say more than 1,000? How many? 5, 10,000? Yeah, we're talking about 16,000 parts. 80% of them are built here, in-house. Like from bare materials. They make them from scratch. And more importantly, they change them a lot. Like over the course of the season, 90% of those parts gets a change. Only 10% survive the season. And maybe this year it's even less with the rule changes. So if you count back, we're talking about 1,000 changes per week, 1,000 little innovations that create marginal gains to go faster. Like how do you crank out 1,000 innovations or 1,000 changes to these cars a week? Right, this car is never going to be in the same configuration. It's like a driving prototype, basically. It's always going to be evolving. So you have 1,000 people doing 1,000 changes per week, right? You need to kind of have some, you need to organize that somehow. But why do they make all these changes? Well, the big reason is that these cars, over the course of a season, become 2 seconds per lap faster. Right? Imagine arriving at the first race and you have the fastest car, and you say, well, we're done for the year. Like maybe we focus on something else. Well, throughout the season, halfway the season, you're going to be at the back of the grid because 2 seconds is the difference becoming between first and last. So all of the teams are doing this. All of these teams are looking for those gains and competing with each other, and they're also spying on each other, right? So if somebody brings an innovation to the market or to the racetrack, other teams will take notice and try to copy it. That's how it works. And I would say that's somewhat similar to the business market as well, like the business organizations. If you put an innovation out there, the competitor will take notice and will try to get back to you. All right, so how do they do it? So let's look a little bit behind the scenes, what happens after a race. So I have to assume Max won this race, of course, right? So he's on the stadium, or he's on the podium. Lewis is there, he just lost. And Sebastian Vettel, I don't know what he's doing anymore, but anyway, he was a great Red Bull driver as well in the past. And these, very often the focus is on the superstar drivers, right? These people, they make millions of pounds. They are in the spotlight always, like all the followers, everybody wants their autographs. Most of them have private jets. Imagine, Lewis here just maybe lost a race. He might fly back with his private jet and maybe throws a party or I don't know what he does. And if you follow his Instagram, you know more about what he does than others. But there's something else that's going to happen first. And that's this. This is the race debrief. So after the race, they spend roughly 2 hours reflecting and learning from what just happened. And usually this debrief is longer than the actual race. Right? Imagine doing your work and then you're going to spend another, doing a work week and you're going to do another work week reflecting on how the work week went and how to improve the work week, right? So this balance is very different in our organizations usually. So they are all connected with headphones. Also, there's a team in the factory that's going to be listening in and looking at it. They're going through checklists that are pre-scheduled checklists of all the different elements. So they really, even Mercedes, who has been dominating the sport for 7 years, still knows that they need to keep doing this to stay ahead. So this relentless focus on learning and reflecting is built in. And actually, it's just 1 out of 50 pre-planned meetings that they have over the course of the race weekend. So it's just not this one event, it's after every event, after qualifying, practice session, every time they do pit stop practice, they sit down, reflect, what can we improve? And that is the focus that really got them to constantly evolve. And you see, there's a built-in operating rhythm, we call that, a rhythm, a heartbeat of the organization, where all these learning events and feedback loops are in there at every level of the organization. So part of the work we've been doing with UK Connect is actually to focus on those rhythms and on those heartbeats to kind of continuously evolve the organization. Something else that happens, and we're likely going to see this room as well. This is in a factory. Christian Horner is in front of the group, he's also going to do a race debrief on Monday morning, because they can only bring 60 people to the racetrack. The other 940 people are sitting on the couch, hoping that the part they worked on last week doesn't fall apart mid-race, right? So they're all kind of excited and anxious to hear what really happened behind the scenes, and this is how they involve everyone. So all these different teams, they have high autonomy. So the gearbox team can decide how to manufacture the gearbox, right? There's no manager telling them precisely how to do that. However, this alignment element that is happening here is important for speed. Because now, after this Monday morning event, everybody actually already knows what is the priority, what is really that we need to focus on up until the next race. And you already know, you don't need to if you have an idea of what to do, you don't need to go and schedule a meeting and then find a manager for approval. No, it's already, everybody has the same context, everybody has the same level of alignment. So maybe this week I will not disturb the electronics team because they're working on a key issue, because I already know that. So high autonomy, high alignment are some key ingredients to do that. The other thing that Formula One teams have, which is a bit of a luxurious position, is this extreme clear focus. And it's not only clear focus of winning races and winning championships, it's also publicly visible. So everybody basically knows, everybody in the world knows how you're performing on stage. That's very different from most organizations. But I would always recommend to see if we can get this level of clarity in your place as well. And actually it was Frank Williams who was famous for asking this question: does it make the car go faster? So if somebody would ask him to spend some money or to get an approval for some kind of innovation, this is the only question he asked, and everybody knew he was going to ask this question. If the answer was yes, he would say go ahead. So this is ingrained in the way of working. Also, I think we might enter the main reception building as well. Yeah. So we're going to see this huge wall of prizes, which is right there. So everybody enters the building already has a visual reminder of why is it what I'm doing every day here? What is it what I'm doing every day? What am I doing here? And everybody understands their own personal contribution to that higher purpose. And again, that if you do that in your own organization, it needs work. It needs work to connect and to understand why do we exist as an organization and how does it all add up and what is my personal contribution to unlock that level of motivation. There's a few other tricks in the book. So this is what we're talking about, right? We're talking about everybody trying to focus their energy to go in the right direction. It's actually from a book called Essentialism by Greg McKeown. And there's one tool in that book that we use a lot with clients, which is something called the essential intent. So very often we have this overarching vision or the purpose of the organization is clear. Like we want to be the best in the market in blah, blah, blah for our customers and stakeholders and the best service. Great, that's awesome. But it doesn't really help me today to know if I need to go left or right. If I need to make a decision today, it doesn't really help me. It doesn't really create focus. We do also often have quarterly outcomes, right? These are kind of these goals that are sometimes quite dull with numbers in it and metrics, which is important to have, but it doesn't really inspire me. And kind of the ingredient, the secret sauce of essential intent is something in between, where we have some inspiring goal on a 1 to 3 year time horizon that actually helps me understand today if I need to say yes to this request or no. So crafting your essential intent, sometimes called strategic intent, is really helpful, creating that level of focus and to get that one arrow going in one direction. All right, let's go back to F1. So here's a video. It's rather noisy. Let's see how loud it is. Of Mark Webber. So here's a cameraman hit by a wheel. You don't want this to happen, right? So F1, there's failure happening in F1, not only teams get a huge fine for this. You want to prevent this from happening because the race is over, right? He's at the end of the pit lane, standing there, and 1 out of 20 point scoring opportunities is over. So you could say like 5% of his season is over because somebody made a mistake during the pit stop. And sometimes I kind of tease out some reactions when I ask, what happens in your organization if one person's mistake results in the loss of 5% of the yearly revenue? Right? For some companies, we're talking about millions and millions of euros or dollars or pounds. So would that person still work there? Sometimes it's no. He would be fired on the spot. But in F1, they think about these kinds of incidents very differently. Because it's rarely just one person's error. It's rarely just one person's mistake. So here's a way of analyzing those root causes. So in this case, first of all, we had an equipment failure. So the effect is clear, right? He drove away with one wheel not connected. But there was an equipment failure. The person trying to replace the tire discovered that the wheel nut was cracked, was broken. So when he was going back on the wheel, they couldn't reattach the wheel nut. So equipment failure, not this guy's fault. So he threw away the wheel nut, grabbed the backup wheel nut, and tried to put that one. But by the time he was back, the car was already gone. So there was a communications failure, also not this person's problem. So often we try to put the blame on a person, but it's usually a systemic thing. You need to have a systemic view in incidents like these to kind of understand it so you actually can go faster. So one of the former directors of Mercedes actually has a good quote here, which is, every time you have a negative response to an issue, you're denying yourself the opportunity to improve. So it's a good lesson in good little wisdom here. Like when something goes wrong, okay, what caused it? Not that person. What are the circumstances? What can we learn in every direction? Something else about pit stops and how they evolved over the years. Another little video for you.
But Holland comes in for a pit stop. Time to refuel and change tires. Lou Moore himself changes the tires. It's a tense time. Holland stays in his seat, anxious to get away. Let's watch. Tires are changed at last. A crewman polishes the windshield as Holland moves away just 67 seconds after he stopped.
So huge difference, right? Sub 2 second pit stop, 67 seconds. My question to you is, which of the two is more efficient? Second one? Why? Sorry? Quicker? Is that more efficient? Is that quicker? Is it more efficient? It requires a lot more personnel, yeah. Yeah, this is always, we can talk for hours about this, but I won't. I would say the first one is more efficient. Because during the race, only 2 people are doing nothing when there's no pit stop. Right? Only 2 people are wasting their time waiting for the car to come in. Well, in the other example, we have over 20 people sitting on their butts just waiting for the car to come in. Right? So that doesn't sound really efficient, does it? But as you know, it's super, super effective. And the reason I'm putting this polarity here, because I think this focus on efficiency needs to go. Right? Very often, when you look at organizations, and our management models and our bureaucracies, which was invented 100 years ago, so much of that is focusing on efficiency, trying to crank out more production, trying to crank out more hours, more hours per person, or to get more productivity out. And that, the mechanisms to which we get that is planning, predicting, controlling, and basically, reducing cost. So that's the efficiency focus, the efficiency mindset. However, in a lot of the modern day organizations, the problems we're trying to solve are much more complex. It's not just this linear trying to make pins in a factory. It's not a linear problem. It's a problem that goes in all different directions. And we want everybody to kind of think and use all of their brains to get to the outcomes we want to get to. And that requires that we design our organizations for adaptivity and effectiveness, which creates more of a sense and respond mindset, which is more based on value and on feedback loops like we had. All right, so how did they get to this sub 2 second performance? And we might see something of that today. Here's pit stop practice Thursday evening. All right, so if you ever are going to a race weekend, usually on Thursday evening you can get in and do a pit lane walk. Who has done that already once? Yeah, just a few. It's highly recommended. You can, even with the cheapest tickets, usually you can just walk through on Thursday night through the pit lane. And at one point they're going to do starting pit stop practice. And they do this 10 times in the morning, 10 times in the afternoon, every day of the week that they're working. Also when they're in the factory. So in the factory here they have an electrical car, an electrical version of the car where they practice with, and we're going to see that. So it's all about discipline. It's all about repetition. But after every single pit stop, there's going to be an analysis. Everything is analyzed with cameras and debriefs and etc. So again, it's this relentless focus on learning and improving. The other thing that's going to be likely visible today is this the communications room, the operations room. So because teams can only bring a limited amount of people to the racetrack, all the teams kind of sneakily extend their teams through remote garage. You might have heard of that term before. So they're going to have 40 to 50 people sitting during every race event, including practice and qualifying, sitting here at the factory, monitoring all the data on the cars. It's almost like mission control, like Houston Mission Control at NASA. All these graphs, all these different things. They're monitoring over 100 different sensors on the car, and that in total streams like only over 400 gigabytes of data per race. So these are like data vacuum cleaners that are just driving around and collecting stuff. That all goes into computer simulations that, during the race, they spend a lot of time analyzing different scenarios. First and foremost, there's a whole separate crew focused on safety, right? If they can predict that the tire will blow, very often, not always, but they can see something disintegrating in the car. So obviously, their first priority is to stop the car if it's not safe to drive. But then furthermore, like, what is the performance relative to our competitors? What is the tire performance? What's the degradation? And what does that mean for our race strategy? So their use of technology is amazing. They have lots of like hundreds of virtual machines trying to calculate and trying to predict the future and trying to predict the competitors, and that ultimately gets funneled to the pit lane or to the pit wall where the sporting director puts the call that he needs to come into the pits or not. And they usually have only 1 or 2 minutes to make the decision, because every time the driver passes the pit lane entry, there's another window of opportunity to make a decision to go in or not. So this has to happen quickly, and they get assisted by technology that they have here in-house. All right, so let's little side step here. A couple of famous names over there. Over here you have Nokia on the Forbes magazine. 1 billion customers, can anyone catch the cell phone king? That article came out 5 months before the iPhone was introduced, and the rest is history, right? Kodak famously invented digital photography, but decided not to adopt it because they were afraid of cannibalizing their film industry, their film business. Guess what? They barely survived that. And then everybody knows Netflix, right? But does anybody know Blockbuster? Is that something? Yeah, I mean, Blockbuster, video rentals, DVD rentals, video films. You could get them all over the place. This is the company that famously declined to buy Netflix for $50 million right before they got bankrupt themselves. Why? Because they decided to stick with the model. Netflix quickly, 10 years after they were founded, decided to completely focus on streaming. So they saw streaming technology come. They decided let's go on that route because that is the future. And again, the rest is history. Blockbuster is no longer here, and Netflix is one of the most successful companies out there. So even Netflix started with rentals, like the old model, but they quickly pivoted. And I think there's lots of documentation out there about Netflix culture and the way of innovating the practices they have in their company, and we can learn from that a lot. So long story short, instead of risking anything new, let's play it safe by continuing our slow decline into obsolescence. Right? So change or slowly die as a company is, I think, the credo here. And F1 companies really understand that and have everything ingrained in their DNA to be able to do that. So they have built a capability to continuously adapt and evolve, not only in technology, not only in innovation, but also in the way they work and the way they organize. And that is a super important muscle to kind of build in organizations. So one more example from a customer perspective. So I got my new Tesla. 2 months later, I found it like this in the parking spot. A truck basically crashed into it and kind of ripped it open from the side. Unfortunately, as a thin can, like kind of ripping it open. So yeah, I don't know who did this, so I was quite frustrated, of course. I went to the body shop. So I called up my insurance company. They said, let's go, you just make an appointment with the body shop, get it inspected. So I just, okay, so this happened to my car. When can I come in for inspection? He said, well, it's quite busy at the moment. Can you come 2 weeks from now? Like, oh, okay, all right, fine. I'll just come 2 weeks from now. So I go there. The person looks at it. I'm like, oh yeah, interesting. Yeah, it needs a lot of new parts. I'm going to put it in our schedule, and I'll call you back when it's ready for to get it replaced. So they called in like, oh yeah, so the parts are in. You can come in and bring it in. Another 2 weeks has passed. So 4 weeks in, I bring my car, and I get this terrible Skoda Octavia. I don't know if I'm insulting anyone, but I'm not a huge fan of that car, especially coming from an electric car. And anybody want to guess how long it took them to actually completely repair it? Well, it was another 2 weeks, so it was not that bad. But like for 14 days, it took them to, when the parts are there, I would say like they replaced it was only body damage, right? They didn't really need to kind of do any, like, I don't know how you call it, but like it was mostly superficial. So you would say it could be faster than 2 weeks. And imagine having a camera pointed at my car in their body shop. What percentage of the time do you guess they were actually working on it? I would say less than 10%. If you put a camera on it day and night, how many hours was it there? How many hours did somebody actually work on it? What was happening in the meantime? Maybe that person was working on another car. Maybe that person was having a meeting, or maybe 2 weeks of waiting. Let's take a look at how they do it F1 in an F1 team.
Championship leader Lewis Hamilton smashed into the barriers at turn 12 in final practice at the Belgian Grand Prix.
I'm in a wall, guys. Sorry.
The British driver dropped a rear wheel onto the curb and lost control of his Mercedes, crunching into the tyres and bringing out the red flag. The extent of the damage after such a heavy impact means the team face a battle to get his car ready for qualifying.
Yeah, so 2 hours between the last free practice session and qualifying. I would say his car looked a bit worse than my car, right? Like he had actually had his wheel ripped off, like the brake system was broken, the steering, everything. Like there's a lot more damage here than what were in my car. So for the 2 hours after that, I actually took this photo because I had a pit lane walk between. Another lesson we can take from F1, if somebody is working on an important problem, don't disturb them. Don't get them out of the zone if it's an important problem. So kind of they closed off their place. They were focusing for 2 hours. And guess what happened?
Lewis Hamilton crashed in the final practice session. What does that do to his confidence? And first of all, what does it do to his car? Can they get that fixed?
The red flag helped them, but that's an impressive effort from the Mercedes team to get that car back on track.
I think they'd have been out with or without the red flag, I'd have thought, but it's given them a bit of breathing space.
Yeah, so I mean, it's obviously apples and oranges, but they got the job done in 2 hours. And even if I would be asked, like, hey, do you want a service where you need to drive this Skoda for 2 weeks, or can you, or 2 days? It's going to be twice as expensive, or maybe you pay something extra, but it's going to be 2 days instead of 2 weeks. I would definitely go for the body shop that offered me 2 days. So from a customer perspective as well, like if you think about lead times and waiting time for a customer, if you design your process from that angle, a lot is possible, and F1 is proving it basically. All right, so how do you start? Nelia is going to take us into that session more, but one of the things I want to introduce quickly is something we call the operating system canvas. It's a social technology that runs in your organization that enables everything, like an operating system in a phone where the apps are basically built upon. We've interviewed over 100 different radical organizations that are innovative, that are fast-moving, that are self-managing, and we asked them, what is special about your way of working? over time, these 12 different categories of answers emerged. And this is basically where the innovation is happening. So if you think about new ways of working and the future of work, there are different practices in how we have meetings, how we make decisions, how we structure a company, how do we compensate people, how do we share information. And this is used as a conversation tool. So you can first think about, like, how is it that we actually make decisions here? Like in the authority field, how do we actually share power and make decisions? What do we believe should be true about that? And are we doing that, or are we doing something else? So it's a good tool to get into the mindset of reflection and improving your way of working. And also creates this systemic view, because if you're going to change something in the authority field, you probably need to give that people the right information as well to make the right decision. So it's all interconnected. So the operating system, there's more about that in our books and our articles, but it's an invitation to take a look there. Summarizing the lessons from F1. What is this focus? Define and clarify what is essential, first bit. Leverage the best technology to enable your team. Change or lose, embrace change to stay ahead, keep accelerating. This customer focus, applying the pit stop metaphor or the body shop metaphor to your service. And then finally, try, fail, and learn, because we know that no blame cultures are the ones that will win. All right, that's it. Thanks so very much. I hope this was helpful.